Hey guys, welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find me on Twitter at AKNacer. Joining me today in his own studio is the international award-winning, rockstar-esque, badass product photographer,
Man,
Rob Grimm.
that's the best title ever. I love it. Thank you.
I worked very hard on that.
Good.
You can find Rob on Twitter at RGGPhoto. And today we're in your awesome studio.
Yeah, welcome.
In St.
Thanks
Louis.
for coming down.
Man, it's really great to be here.
Good.
We're going to have some fun today.
Good. Looking forward to it.
This is going to be part one of our interview with Rob. We're going to be talking about business. We're going to talk about the industry. He shoots amazing, amazing product photos. So if you guys are portrait photographers, landscape photographers, this is a really interesting, different part of the photography industry that I think we should definitely pay attention to. And so we're going to talk about business experience, building out studios. We're in an amazing one right now. And then part two, we're actually going to be talking about going through Rob's book and talking about images specifically. So
Let's get rolling.
let's get into it.
All right.
Tell
What do you
me,
wanna know?
yeah, a little bit about yourself. We'll just do like a general background.
All right. Going all the way back?
All the way back to the beginning.
All the way back to the beginning. All right. Started taking pictures when I was 8. My mom gave me a little camera on a family trip and started taking pictures then. My father was into photography. He was an art teacher, mainly dealing with ceramics and painting. And somewhere in probably my junior high school years, he started taking over the photography department, which was great because it meant we had to build a darkroom at home.
Nice.
And he was really getting into it. So the more he learned about photography, it was actually an opportunity for the two of us to learn together. And since I was always kind of at his side, he was my dad, I really picked up a ton of stuff from him. Went to college for fine arts, studio arts, and photography was my emphasis. Moved to Chicago after college and went to work in the auction business, which I hated beyond belief and missed being in a darkroom and missed having a camera in my hand. So I started interning and assisting at studios up in Chicago, and that's how I got into the business back in 1990, I guess.
Okay.
A while ago.
Right on.
More than 2 decades ago.
That's awesome.
That's a while.
It's awesome that you're still in it and still loving it. I mean,
Totally love it.
yeah.
Wouldn't do anything else.
We were talking earlier, and your passion is still like, it's pretty evident that you actually really care, and that's
Good.
That's huge. So, 1990s.
Yeah.
Describe it briefly as you can from the 1990s to today. What's kind of changed during the time? How have you grown up as a photographer? And,
Everything has changed
Right.
from the 1990s. I mean, you think about that time, it was all film. There was no such thing as digital photography, and had you even told me we'd be shooting digital photography, I'd probably tell you were crazy. It sounded like it was from Mars. So it was a very different business back then. The pace was different. You had to take more time with things because everything was on film. And a lot of the cameras that we were using for advertising photography, you're talking 4x5 and 8x10 cameras, which are big and cumbersome and take a lot of time. So a shot that we can now do in a half a day would probably take 3 full days.
Wow.
Back in that era. Very different thing. So it's actually where the business is now is really exciting. I'm very, very glad that I had the opportunity to grow up in the film era. To me, it's a phenomenal experience. It's incredibly important, and it has shaped the decisions that I make with digital photography. Without question, having that film background really means a lot. Because, well, for several reasons. I think back in that day, you really had to apprentice. You had to take time, and by time I mean years, 3, 4, 5 years,
Wow.
being an assistant, working for other photographers, and learning the craft. Because when you made choices, they were across the spectrum. And that is, you would choose the camera, you would choose the lens, you would choose the film stock, black and white color, the ASA, because it's going to mean a different grain structure.
Right.
You'd choose your processing. If you were going to do it, black and white in the darkroom, what developer were you going to use? Because it all created a different grain structure
Right.
in that film. And then you go in the darkroom, and you there pick out which paper you wanted to use and what toners and that kind of stuff. So you could get a very different result with the same image by using a different film stock, a different developer.
Very interesting.
So you'd have to, it took a while to learn all those different things, and then you could kind of loop them together and piece them together as you wanted to create a specific look. It's a lot faster and easier in digital, but I think it's really important to have that process, at least for me. It feels very important that I know what that process was, and it gives me the ability to make decisions in terms of pre-visualizing what I want my end result to be, because I know the whole process.
Right.
That's really critical.
Yeah, I think you bring up an awesome point, is that, when you had to shoot film, you had to pre-visualize, 20 different steps.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
that maybe 10 of those steps don't really exist anymore, but
No, they're gone.
You replace them with different steps. So training your brain to visualize the whole process.
Fewer steps, but it's also different because you can shoot RAW now, and the cameras have become so advanced. It's hard to get a bad file. It really is. When digital first came out, that wasn't the case. You could really screw up a file very quickly and wind up with something terrible. Now cameras are so sophisticated that you can get great RAW files out of the get-go, process those out 15 different ways in an instant, not spend hours in a darkroom or send it out to the lab and wait a few hours while the film comes back and see what you got, and then reshoot it after you've looked at it on a loop and seen what's wrong. It's interesting, yeah.
I think it's really interesting, and I'm from the completely opposite camp.
I know.
My first camera was a digital camera.
That's amazing.
And it wasn't that long ago, so I feel like a bit of a hypocrite. But I do know that the barrier to entry is now so low. You can pick up. I mean, an iPhone can take great photos. And
yeah.
What I think is unfortunate a little bit is that it puts everyone kind of a little bit higher level than maybe they should be, or maybe they were in the past, and it makes people feel like they're going to get to professional level much faster, or that they don't need to take that time. And I think that's a little bit unfortunate, because talking with you and other professionals, it seems like that time is still, you need to spend that time.
Here's the thing, the most important thing about becoming a professional photographer is the time. You have to invest the time to learn the craft. And we were joking around about that article about hipsters, how they're angry that Instagram hasn't made them a professional photographer. Well, it's true. If you don't know what a camera can do, if you don't know its ability, its limitations, if you don't know Photoshop, its abilities, its limitations, you can't craft a final image. You can't craft this business. There's just no way to do it. So, yeah, it's critical to know those steps.
It is, yeah, and that's, we're going to be talking about business here in just a little bit, but, like you said, I mean, it takes 10 years alone to learn the business of the,
It takes a while, no question.
Yeah, so
don't rush it.
Don't rush it, right? That's a good piece of advice.
Yeah.
Don't try to rush being a professional.
No, you could really, you could hang yourself out to dry very quickly. If you feel like you've got the goods and you've got some decent images, and you talk a client into something that you're not ready for, you might just be hanging yourself. You really need to have the confidence that you can not only pull it off, but you can handle the different things that come at you. Because one of the things I can guarantee you about a professional shoot, all the planning that goes into it does not eliminate the curveballs. And what you have to do is you have to plan for those curveballs, and you have to have enough knowledge, somewhere in you, to know that you can handle whatever comes up with accuracy and with grace and with a calm attitude, because the last thing clients want is
freaking out.
Yeah, and some photographers are known for that. They scream, they kick, they throw clamps, they yell at their assistants, and I get wanting to do that because there's a ton of pressure. When you're the guy and 15 people or 10 people are standing around waiting for you to make something happen, that artwork that has to be done by the end of the day, that everybody is involved with, that dollars on the line, and let's get out of here by 5 so we can go cocktail.
Right.
There's pressure on that, and people can blow their top, but nobody likes that.
No.
It's ugly, and it makes everybody uncomfortable. It changes the whole vibe of a shoot really fast.
That's a really good point. You want everyone leaving, with a feeling like that was a lot of fun. Like we did something.
Well, it is
together.
fun. You know what? Here's the thing. We're making pictures. Nobody's life is on the line. This is not brain surgery. We're not in an ER where, my God, if we don't get this right, this guy's going to croak. We're making pictures.
Right.
So let's enjoy the process. Let's make it good for everybody. And if we happen to screw it up, take responsibility for it, come back the next day, make it right, make it work. That's all it is.
Totally. And you mentioned, and I want to get this later when we talk more about business, but making some wrong decisions early on can wind up hanging yourself. And I'm curious to know if it's because of the relationships that you build and the fact that this industry is so tight-knit that, if you really mess it up with a big client, is that going to spread across the...
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Because keep in mind what happens. It happens less now. Since the economy changed in 2008, people don't move around from one job to the next, but it was very, very typical for an art director to move from one shop to the next within 12 months, 18 months as they climb the ranks. That doesn't happen as much anymore, but people are still moving around. If they came to you and you blew it and you weren't cool about it and the experience was horrible, they're going to remember that. They're not going to come to you, and the shop that they're at currently probably isn't going to come to you. And then when they move, they're not going
to come to you either.
You want those guys to have a good experience with you. You want to make great images for them, and you want them to remember that the process was good. Because as they keep moving from shop to shop, they'll take you with you.
Right.
That's the key.
And that's really important too, I think, what you just said, because it's a lot of, I feel like in the photography industry, photographers tend to think that they have the vision, or they're the quote unquote important ones.
Yeah, that's a huge mistake.
But it seems like in talking to you that your job is to make the people who are paying you look good.
Yeah,
in some ways.
I think I have a different belief than a good number of photographers. A lot of photographers do think that it's their vision and people are coming to them for a reason and therefore their way goes. I don't believe that for 1 minute, and here's why. Number one, brands are hiring me to help sell their product. They know their product, they know their messaging, they know their brand strategies. The clients have been in all the brand meetings. They've sat down with the people that run the company. They've sat down with their teams and they've talked about what is their message. They know it better than I do. So I'm not going to be pompous and say, you know what, now that you're here and you've hired me, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want, and you're going to take the images and love them. I want to know what their message is. If I understand that, then I can help craft their message better.
That makes sense.
And I think it's really important to be a very collaborative photographer. Other photographers are, hey, now that I have this, I'm just doing what I want to do.
Right.
I don't want to do that. I want to know if the client likes it. I want to know if they like the process. I want them to look at it and evaluate and say, hey, I don't know if that's going to work because of X. And I can say, hey, you know what? I think it is because of this reason. I think it's really important to be collaborative. It's relationships, and you got to talk back and forth about this and how it's going to work and how it's going to make their brand better. And at the end of the day, this image is for them. It's got to sell their product. It's not selling my product. It's not selling me. All my advertising, all the work that I do, open a magazine, see a billboard. How many times have you seen the name Rob Grimm shot this ad?
Never. It's never on it.
It's never on there. Never will be. We don't get, it's not like photojournalism where you get a credit.
Mm-hmm.
In advertising, your name isn't on it. People don't know you did it. So that's kind of a bummer. It's great when you have a billboard in Japan or you've got a Grolsch ad in Times Square. That's awesome, but nobody knows you did it. So remove your ego. Make the image the best it can be, make it the best message for the client, and then revel in the success of it.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, we'll talk today about, Rob versus other photographers. We said that a couple of times, like other photographers believe this. And, I'll probably wind up interviewing some of those other photographers. Yeah. But I'm confident in what you're saying in a large part because you've been doing this for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And you're still in the business. You're still doing very well. And
and I survived the hardest economic times. I think that's also pretty important.
Very important.
Yeah. That period of shakeout was a shakeout, and a lot of guys are no longer.
And that's a really good point too.
Yeah.
So it's that gives me even more confidence in what you're saying because it's like, well, obviously,
and also
keep
in mind this is right for me.
Right.
This process that I go through is right for me. There are some very big name photographers who have huge egos, and some people like that. Some clients like that. They want to be told what to do. They want to kind of, I don't know if it's worshiping at the heels, but they want to look up to this guy who's got a big name. So there's a market for it. It's just not me. I mean, it's not who I am as a person, and it's not the way I want to work. It's too arrogant, and that's not a place I live.
Right. So stay true to who you are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Good. Yeah. Valid point.
Right on. Yeah. I try to as well. That's why I'm wearing pink socks. So let's talk about shooting products as opposed to people, because you do photograph people.
Yeah, I do.
But mostly, I would say you photograph.
Mostly it's product.
Okay.
Without question.
So tell me how, in the early stages, did you kind of photograph people, photograph products, do a few different things, and how did you kind of come to where you are now?
I think that I came to where I am because I started photographing architectural elements. my college portfolio and the things that I was doing back then, I was photographing sculpture and buildings and that kind of stuff. So that taught me about form and how light reflects, bounces off, shapes, gives, life to form, being a building or a sculpture or whatever it was, landscape. That translates directly to a bottle. How light hits off of a bottle, how it hits off of a shoe, something like that. That can also be translated to a person, by the way.
Right.
So the way I light a product might influence the way I light a person. Because some of we're using a lot of the same tools in terms of light shapers and that kind of thing. Not everything's a crossover, but you're learning about form and you're learning about shape and sculpture and how to make something come to life using light.
Yeah. So
does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I mean, if you can learn, what happens in 3 dimensions, then it does translate.
It's a tough thing because in this business, people want you to specialize. They want to know that they could come to you for one thing and that's kind of your wheelhouse, which is great. But it doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to light other things. It doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to capture other things. And that can be frustrating when you can shoot people well, but you don't have enough of it in your book, or people don't know you. They know you as a product photographer. They're not going to come to you for the lifestyle stuff. And even though you can do it. But it's really important to take those lessons of light and composition from one discipline and move it to the next, because it'll help you in the exploration of the lifestyle. If you know what you're doing and feel confident about what you're doing with a product, you can then approach doing a lifestyle shoot based on that knowledge. It'll help you craft that.
Yeah, just like you took architecture and applied that to product.
Right. And I kind of fell into that because the first studio that I was involved with was very heavy on product. They had a lifestyle photographer and they had a product photographer. And I happened just to gravitate towards that product photography. It made sense to me. How light bounces off of glass or doesn't bounce off of glass and refracts and reflects through it. That just made sense to me. My eye caught it, it got it, and it works.
So that's kind of the out of everything you shot and kind of everything, you enjoyed something about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hesitate to use the term "it spoke to me" or "it will speak to you," but I think it kind of does.
Right.
There's something about it that will just click and it'll make sense. I mean, as you pick up a camera, it'll make sense. You're like, this is what I want to do. And it might not be what you ultimately do. Right. It's the pathway. It's what gets you in and gets you moving through the photographic process.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. When I first got my start, I was photographing, products, landscapes. I went out and shot like homeless people because a bunch of people on Flickr were doing it. And I thought that was cool. And I was like, man, I hate photographing people who don't like to be photographed.
I think almost everybody does that. And one of the photographers, Mark Katzman, that I used to work with, he said it to me and he said it to a lot of assistants and other people that come through. Stop photographing other people's art. Because what you wind up doing is you're photographing graffiti or sculpture or some homeless guy sleeping in front of a graffitied wall.
Right.
In some ways it's cheating because the emotion's already there. Somebody else has created something that has some sort of emotional draw, and that's what photography is. You're trying to capitalize on the telling of an emotion that sparks something in somebody and they're like, oh, wow. So you gotta stop doing that. Enough with the graffitied walls. Enough with the homeless people. Although they're good. I mean, those photographs can be cool.
Mine weren't good, but I've seen some that are good. Mine were not.
Yeah, all right, that's a valid point. Mine weren't that good either.
No. Cool. So stop photographing other people's art.
Absolutely.
Right on. And it's interesting because in my work, I photograph people quite a bit, and I really try to bring emotion to the photos. Right. And I know for you, emotion's also important. That emotional factor is important, but you're not trying to like capture the horrors of war or the sadness of poverty. What's the emotion that you're trying to get across?
It's mood, it's life, it's lifestyle, it's desire. I'm not trying to belittle what people who photograph people do, but it's easier because the wrinkles on a guy's face tell a story.
Right.
What somebody is wearing, the look in their face, the tears in their eyes, the laughter, whatever. That kind of tells the story. So, but you still have to capture that well. It's got to be well composed. It's really hard to do that with a bottle. If you've got a bottle of Bombay Sapphire, it doesn't have the wrinkled face or, you know, that expression. You've got to create a mood. You've got to create a mood that the viewer then wants to get into. I want to be in that space. I want to have that cocktail because that looks good.
Desire.
Yeah,
it's huge.
It's absolute desire. And it's a desire that they not only do they want it, they want to incorporate it in their life because they want to.
Right.
My clients want them to come back to that again and again and again. So I want to create a mood. I want to create a setting. I want to create a feeling that the viewer goes, oh yeah.
So you're creating a celebrity out of like a glass of water, basically.
Celebrity. Yeah, I guess so.
Right, a little bit.
Making it heroic. Yeah, we talk about heroic bottles and doing that kind of stuff all the time. Yeah, we are absolutely trying to make them look enticing.
Best they can possibly look.
Yep.
You know, you've never seen a beer bottle look this good in your life.
It's got to be juicy and yummy and cold and like, I gotta have a beer.
Right?
Even though it's 11 o'clock in the morning, I need that beer.
This is vodka, by the way.
Yeah, straight vodka.
We are so.
I'm a little hammered. You?
Yeah, I was at 9 a.m.
I'm ahead of you, by the way.
Yeah, you are. Okay, so a really interesting start into how you got into product photography.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also curious because I think CG has come a long way. I mean, when you started, it was the film days, and CG was just kind of like
didn't exist.
It wasn't even on the radar. And now digital has come along, and CG is really, really creeping up on our industry as a whole.
It's replaced some of the photographs that we could have and probably should have done. It's replaced it. Rendering has replaced product.
This might freak you out.
Yeah.
I saw that H&M no longer photographs models. They have 3D models that they switch their clothes out on. So when they need a face, they retouch. They composite a face onto a 3D model. But the bodies, they're all perfect because they're all CG. So there's no retouching the bodies anymore. So H&M was one of the first companies to start doing it.
That does freak me out, and I hate that. I get it from a business point of view. For them, it's done.
Right.
They can kind of change things faster, and the business has changed so that everybody wants something now. I was talking about before where it may take us 3 days to shoot something. Planning was much further out. I mean, we used to shoot 18 months ahead of something. If a campaign for Christmas was going to go out, we shot it 18 months ahead of time because it all had to be through that process and printed. Now it's like people will call you up today and they want something tomorrow at 2 o'clock. The crazy thing is we can give it to them.
You can give it to them. Whoa.
So I get from H&M's point of view why they would want to have that library and be able to pull from it and make changes and get it out there. I mean, the business is moved very, very fast, and they need it.
And
but it sucks from a photographer's point of view for that industry to go away. It's gone.
Yeah, it's taking the job of a photographer and putting it to a CG artist.
Yeah.
Which is, what's your experience with that as far as product photography goes?
We've had it a lot. I just did a combined still and motion shoot in December, and it was all lifestyle stuff, which was great. It was great for me to be doing that. And there's product involved with it as well. The product wasn't done in time, wasn't made, so they had renderings done. Well, those renderings look great. We're not going to shoot the product in the studio because they don't need them. They've got the renderings, they look good. Right. They're going to be, combined on the website with the still images. They don't need to have the product shot. So it eliminated a job that we would have done.
And the product didn't even exist to be photographed.
No, it didn't exist, and that's one of the things that's happened too. Products aren't ready, but they want to have the launch ready. So they're using CGI to get the campaign or the website or whatever needs to be built, it's built. So when that product hits the stores, it's all done. It's ready. Poof, it all rolls out on one day. 100%, 360, they say that all the time now. And that's the truth. It just happens so quickly.
Wow. That's insane.
It is insane. And the other thing, when computers first became a factor in this business, a lot of us, and particularly the studio I used to be in, we were like, man, the computers are great, but it's kind of making our clients, I hesitate to say dumb, but it took a lot of the creativity out. Where before you had marker comps, you had sketches, you'd say, okay, this is what we wanted to do. That left a huge leeway for what would happen in the studio.
Right.
Now, the computer is creating a comp that's so tight, and sometimes it's using existing photography. It's creating a comp that is so tight, they come in and we need to do something that is almost identical to that. It's like you have to match that but make it real. And it's weird.
It takes away some of your creative.
Well, it takes away some of our creative juices without
Right.
question. It also creates some challenges because quite often they will be putting together a comp using clipped images.
Right.
And one image in that comp may be shot on an 80 millimeter lens while another one's shot on 150. And
they want it to look exactly
they want
like
it to
the comp.
look like that, but it can't look like
Yeah.
that. Physically, it's not possible.
Let's slow down, and
It's
just
just
in
not
case
possible.
anyone's not familiar with
Okay.
a comp, we're going to talk about the
Oh
entire
yeah,
process.
I may be throwing out terms.
Throwing
to
some
you,
terms.
to
I
you,
mean-
you guys who have never shot on film that you might not even know, right?
No worries.
So stop me and let me know.
No worries. I'll stop you. We're gonna talk about the whole process, but just briefly, could you explain what a comp is, who you get it from, and
Yeah. Comps or layouts come from the ad agencies, the design firms, and they are basically a sketch of the campaign. They show what they need to produce
Yep.
and what they need me to execute. And it can be in a variety of different forms. It can be outdoor, it can be print for magazine, it can be for neckers, which is, it goes around a bottle. You know,
Okay.
it's a little cardboard thing, it goes around
Yep.
the bottle.
Yep.
It can be for a case card, which is at the end of a display, and you know, here's our booze, here's our case card, you know. So it can be a variety of different things, and those all have different sizes, and they will comp up what they want it to look like. So it's a layout, basically. So
Yeah.
layout and comp are the same thing.
Okay, cool. So like if someone's seen Mad Men or something, where they're like sketching with Prismacolors and markers, that was like the what a comp
that was those were marker comps.
Marker comps, exactly.
Yeah.
And now they're just doing it with computers. They're taking
Yeah.
a stock photo here, a stock photo there, sticking them together
Photoshop, Illustrator,
relatively
all, yeah.
roughly, and then now they're saying you make the final version of this.
It's not even relatively roughly anymore. Those the comps now that are coming from Photoshop and Illustrator are so tight. It's crazy.
That kind of loses the idea of a comp, right? A little bit.
Mm-hmm. A little bit.
Wow.
A little bit.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Makes it tough.
Yeah, right. Hey, recreate this thing that we just kind of pulled out of stock art, clip art.
Using 3 different angles and 4 different lenses.
Right.
And yeah, it doesn't work like
It's
that.
got to be lit the same, in the front part
Yeah.
and also in the back, but it's technically impossible, but you go ahead and do it. Awesome. Let's talk about that. We're going to go through the whole process, but before we do, I want to talk, we're going to a little bit about the different roles of different individuals that are involved in the process.
Sure.
So if a person is watching this and they want to become a photographer, they want to become the next Rob Grimm, but let's say they're...
Those are big shoes, by the way.
I can see.
9s.
Yeah, baby. So they're a year or two in, and they're like, you know what? I don't really like photographing as much. I kind of like the retouching part of it.
Yeah.
Is there, does that job exist? What are some of the other jobs that exist that are peripheral?
There's photographer, there's producer, there's assistant producer, there's retoucher, there's digital tech, there's first assistant.
What's a digital tech do?
A digital tech basically runs the camera-computer relationship, okay? So a digital tech will spend their time behind the computer and making sure that technically everything is working. They know the camera, they know the camera software, the capture software, and they're running the computer. It's a lot to actually be behind the camera, deal with the client, and also try to run the computer. Because one of the things we're doing, in my work in particular, I'm shooting things in pieces. We're shooting for the top label on a bottle. We're shooting for the front main label. We're shooting for the base label. We're shooting for the glow coming through. We're shooting for the fizz in the drink. We're shooting for the garnish on the drink. All those different components. So what I like to do is ensure that the file names are changed to have what component they're for in the title.
Right.
And I want to create a retouching document that goes hand in hand with that. So I can say, hey, okay, this file number 153 is going to be for the main label. And I want my digital tech to put that on the retouching notes. So the retoucher will be able to say, okay, I need to comp these together, and this is what Rob wants me to do. That's a very, very important role.
And some people out there probably didn't even know that a digital tech exists.
No.
So that's a whole...
They do. And
you can make a living as a digital tech.
You can make a living as a digital tech, and it's a very critical thing. Like if I go to other cities, if I travel to LA, that's one of the first people I will contact is a digital tech, because they will know the camera house. They will usually come with their own computer, and they'll bring the equipment to me. They'll set it all up. I get to now concentrate on the client, on the big picture of the job, and walking up to the camera. I don't have to worry about, do I have the right cord? Is the laptop going to work? Is there a tower? What are we doing for backups? They come with all the backup drives, with everything. It's a great and vital part of this business. So yeah, you can make good money as a digital tech too. They have a pretty good rate.
Yeah, and sometimes they can help you check focus and other things like that.
Well, absolutely, because they're looking at the image. They can blow it up to 100%, and you can tell right away if you're critically focused or something. And a good one will just say, hey, by the way, you're not completely tack sharp on this. Let's, you're back focused slightly.
With some tact, right?
Tact.
They're not going to be like, Rob, you're out of focus.
Yeah, you don't want to yell across the studio to the photographer
with your client sitting
with
there.
a client 5 feet away that they've blown the focus. Yeah, you definitely don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Be a little bit more subtle than that.
Right.
Come up with code words or something.
The chicken has flown the coop.
Yeah, even that might get them. But
so we've got producer, we've got
producer's
digital
important
tech, production assistant. What are some of the other roles that kind of surround?
We talked about assistant a little bit. A rep is very important, sales rep, and that's somebody who goes out and gets you the work. They show your book. They get you in front of ad agencies and design firms. They're the ones who usually get the call first about the project and are sent the layout, start working the numbers together, get in touch with you, make sure, one, you're available, two, the numbers work, and they're working with the client. They're there to make sure that the client's happy and have what they need, and that's a very, very important role too.
Yeah.
Sales, though, it's at the end of the day, that is downright sales. Sales have to be in your blood. You cannot, if you don't have sales in your blood and a really good demeanor, you can't be a rep.
Not at all.
No way.
But you can be a photographer without being a great salesman, as long as you can partner with a good rep.
Absolutely, you can. Yeah, if you've got the right people behind you, yeah. And the team makes a difference. I think that's one of the things that's really important about this. The advertising game, it's rare that a photographer just goes out on his own and shoots whatever he wants and comes back and it's turned into ads. I don't want to say that doesn't happen, because it does. Some friends of mine, a group of photographers, were just sent to Hawaii to do a project when they were just turned loose. They had to shoot farmers.
Wow. And
they just got to do what they wanted. So it does exist, but even on that trip, they had a producer, they had 2 digital techs, they had a production assistant, they had a team around them to help them with all the moving parts of a job that let them focus on their part, which is making great images, the crafting of it.
And that's really interesting that you say, this team was flown out to Hawaii, and I find that it's really interesting. When you have a large team, it makes some parts of your job much easier. You're not the one who has to go get the coffee. You're not the one who has to check the focus. But it makes some parts of your job a little bit harder.
Yeah.
You lose a little bit of the freedom when you want to move from on the beach to under the palm tree, and all of a sudden you got to move computers and
Yeah, it's harder when there's a team and there's a lot of stuff, because everything has to move. And there's also a certain amount of pressure, because like I said earlier, you're the guy who's in charge of it all.
Right.
Now 10 people are under you effectively in this production, and they're going to do what you tell them.
Right.
So there's a certain amount of pressure to make the job flow, to make the day flow, to get the images right, and to make sure that everybody's happy. So it's nice to have people who take on roles and they take pressure off of you, and somebody can be paying attention to the client, somebody can be running and getting coffee, or something was neglected on the shoot, you can send a PA out to go get it. All that's great, but it's more people for you to manage at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's more people who are going to be looking to you to make the magic.
Right.
Pull the bunny out of the hat.
Yeah.
You got to be good at that. And when there's no bunny, you got to be pretty good at convincing people that it's coming. Right?
Yeah. You absolutely. When the bunny isn't there yet, they got to believe the bunny's coming.
Right.
It's on its
good.
way.
Yeah. It's a really, like you were saying earlier, it's important not to freak out. Even if things are not going well during a shoot.
Honestly, I can't stress that enough. And that's something that also comes with time. The more you've done this, the more relaxed you are.
Right.
I remember early in my career, being nauseous, wanting to puke, and the whole deal when you've got a whole crew around you, and it's like, oh my God, the client is really spending money with me, and it's pressure. And the more you do it, the more relaxed you become, and that comfort level is it's invaluable experience. And once again, that comes down to time. You cannot rush that end of the business.
Right.
You can go out and get a digital camera very quickly and start shooting, but you cannot rush experience.
That's a good point. Because that is what experience is, it's time. So, yeah. Very good point. Let's talk about, along with the people on the rolls, and we were just talking about PAs and, producers. And let's talk about the process of the entire shoot, from well before you even know about it, to delivery, and then even getting paid for the shoot.
Okay.
I think there are a lot of people who have
down to the ducats, huh?
Let's do it.
All right. The shoot starts long before it ever gets in my hands. It will start at the ad agency or the design firm, and it will start with conversations with the client on, one, what kind of budget they have for the year to execute how many programs. Those clients have to make those decisions on where they're going to spend their marketing dollars and on what they're going to come up with. The ad agency then has to create the look for all that stuff. So they'll sit down and they'll explore styles and looks and concepts and sit down with the client and talk about all that. They'll hone on a particular direction and decide that's the way they want to go. The ad agency will then probably do a series of different comps based on that direction. So once a direction is picked, they'll still explore that and try to figure it out exactly what they want to do. And probably somewhere around that process, they'll get in touch with photographers that they're interested in whose style and look is appropriate for the project.
Through the rep, I guess.
More than likely.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of photographers have reps. Not everybody does, and I certainly haven't had a rep my entire career. I've had different reps, during my career. You don't have to have a rep to be in the business. Higher end advertising, usually there's a rep involved. But I don't want to make it sound like it's exclusive.
Okay,
like
so you don't, it's not necessary?
No, it's not necessary. It's a good thing to have. It's good to have somebody beating the streets for you, but it's also good to have somebody who can manage things while you're shooting. Because if I'm on a job the next 3 days and an estimate comes in, I can't pay attention to it unless it's at night. And that means I'm not paying attention to it until after I've made dinner and got the kids to bed. Now it's 10 o'clock at night. Now I sit down to look at what the client needs. Right. I can't ask them questions because they're gone for the day. So
it's a job you could miss, or
it's a job you could miss. It's a job you could lose because you let something fall through the cracks because somebody's not paying attention to it. So having that rep who's able to say, hey, if they can say at the very least, we got it, we'll talk about it. I know Rob's unavailable right now because he's shooting. We'll get back to you quickly. Right. None of that's bad. That's all good. So, the rep will get in touch with me, or the ad agency, if I don't have a rep, they'll get in touch with me and say, this is the project, this is what we want to do, can you give us numbers? So I will put together a set of numbers based on the parameters of their job. I'm certainly going to have questions for them. One of the first questions is usage. Where is this job going to run? Because a job that's going to be an ad only in, Illinois, does not have the same value, the same dollar amount for an ad that's going to be run all over the world. So you have to look at what the usage is going to be, and you have to price accordingly. So that's a big thing to ask with that question. So we look at all the parameters of the job, and for me, I'll usually talk about it with my rep or my producer to figure out exactly where the numbers should fall. We submit those numbers back to the ad agency. Sometimes go through a couple of rounds of estimating. Very often, the scope will change. Clients will see numbers, and keep in mind, it's rare that we're just bidding by ourselves. There are
other photographers and other
2 or 3 other photographers in the mix. It's almost always a triple bid. It's rare that it would be less than a triple bid. Sometimes it's 4 people, but and that can be frustrating, particularly when you've been in the business 20 years. You're like, you know what? I know I can do this. Right. And you've got to go against other people. That's something you got to get used to. That constant, you're bidding for every job you're going to do. That never, ever goes away. So we bid it out. Then if our numbers are successful, we're awarded the project. Now we go into production. So the rep and the producer and I will talk about exactly what we need, the crew we need to hire, and we start rolling with it. So if it's a studio shoot where we're only doing product, it may be a matter of getting the product to us. Almost all the bottles we shoot come to us from the client. We strip all the bottles. If they have labels on them already, we strip them. We put on hero bottles because bottles are put on by machine.
Right.
Or the labels are put on by machine, and it's never accurate. So we remove all that. We put them on by hand, make sure that they're in the right position, try to get them as level, as straight as possible, and make that work. So we have to figure out when the product's going to get to us, when the labels are going to get to us, who's going to be on the shoot. If it's a food shoot and it's got a food stylist, an assistant food stylist, coordinate everybody's schedules. Particularly a lot of times clients are in other cities, so they got to travel for the shoot. All those arrangements have to be made, coordinated. Studio time has to be booked, make sure everything's up and running, and then the shoot happens. So shoot day will come, or shoot days, depending on how long the project is. And that's when you methodically move through your production that has been hopefully well laid out by yourself and your producer and your rep. And, and for us, at our level, we definitely put together production documents. It's very much like a document that would be put together for a commercial, a TV spot, where everybody's name and phone number are on it. The roles are clearly defined. The schedule of what we're going to try to accomplish by what time of the day and on each day will all be spelled out. So it's a multi-page document that people can look through. They know the expectations of the job. They know the parameters of the job, and it's a guide. And I say the word guide because we don't always stick to it.
Right.
Sometimes product doesn't get in time. Sometimes it's just not going well. You got to shift gears, whatever. But it's a guide. So we also at this point might be talking to our digital retoucher, because retouching is really important in the planning stages. We need to know what we need to accomplish in the capture in order to turn it over to retouching to get that end result. So very often I will sit down and talk with a retoucher before the shoot starts or at the day one and say, okay, here's my approach. This is what I plan on capturing. Is that cool with you? What else am I missing? What else would you like to have just in case? Because one of the things that's become interesting about a really good retoucher, they can actually be shoot insurance. So if something goes wrong, if something isn't exactly right, or a client decides that they don't like something in the composition, it's good to have different components and have a retoucher who could eliminate, change, fix, whatever. Having somebody who can help that end is really important too.
Where might a person learn retouching?
I would suggest this really cool place called Phlearn.
Nice.
That would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Without question.
And I do really want to get into discussing the relationship between the photographer and the retoucher.
Yeah, it's a big relationship. There's a lot to talk about there, and it's very, very important. So when a project has been done, after we shoot it, it then goes into post. So the retoucher will make sure that everything is fixed, corrected, color, saturated, whatever it is that needs to be done on the post-production, and then we deliver the files to the client. And almost everything is delivered via FTP. Mm-hmm. I mean, we really don't send out for proofs that much anymore. We don't send hard drives. It's all done via FTP. Once the client has everything and they know it's good, then we can invoice. That's always a fun process. It's amazing how much money flows through a job, not necessarily to the photographer. When you think about all the people that are on a job, if you've got a producer, a digital tech, a first assistant, a second assistant, a production assistant, and a retoucher, and the photographer. There's a lot of people who all get paid on that, and it's coming under our auspices. So all that money will be flowing through us. So we will make sure that we have invoices from all those people, tally up everything that went into the job, whether it's backgrounds, props, catering, the craft services, all that stuff. All that has to be documented too. We send a backup packet to the client. Everything's scanned, it's all organized, everything's labeled so they know what it is, and a backup packet will go with the invoice to the client so they can show exactly where the money was spent, because they want to know that. It's a lot of accounting. It's a lot of making sure that the dollars were properly spent and properly accounted for. Then it goes to the client. A lot of times we will get an advance for the job, which is really important. If you can get half of the money up front, it really helps, because we float. Clients sometimes won't pay for 90, 60, 90, 120 days, depending on the client. Particularly now, back before 2008, clients were much better about paying. We would get paid 15 days, 30 days, something like that. Now we have to float it.
And we're talking a lot of money here.
You can, yeah, you can be talking 50, 60, 75,000 on a job that is not yours. It's flowing through you to other parties.
Right.
And if you're working for me, if I hire you for a job, and I'm not going to get paid from the client for 90 days, I know you're not going to want to wait 90 days for your retouching fees, are you?
No, not at all.
Right. You're not going to want to work with me again if I string you out 90 days. So I've got to pay you. So if I can get that advance from the client, then at least my expenses are covered.
Right.
And now I can pay you, and I can wait for my fee. Sometimes you need a line of credit to get you through, because there's a lot of moving parts, and it's always good if you're a photographer to have a line of credit to make sure that you want to pay your staff. Even though they're freelancers, you got to look at them as a staff and keep them happy and keep them coming back to want to work with you, because you want to lean on them. You know, you want people that you work with repetition, because repetition means comfort.
Yep, totally.
Very, very important part. So we try to keep our people happy.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting about, both the line of credit, and I'm just, for for a lot of us who are artists,
Yeah.
we're bad with money.
Yeah.
But, floating 50 grand here, 40 grand here.
Yeah, it's
and
hard.
Keeping track of like, okay, I'm negative 50 grand, but in 3 months, I'm gonna get that back. I mean, keeping the books, sounds like a very important part.
It's hugely important. And one of the things that a photographer told me a long time ago was never do accounting in your head. Meaning, don't go, hey, you know what? I just got this job for 10 grand. So that's going to cover my rent for 2 months, and I can buy another lens and blah, 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 blah. Don't do that. You need to know exactly what your overhead is. You need to know what it costs you, not only on a monthly basis, but on a daily basis to run your business. And once you know that, and you keep that well in the forefront of your head, you will then do your accounting the way it needs to be done. And that's by the book, down on paper, being computer. And you really account for your ducats, because if you do the accounting in your head, and a lot of photographers have blown it that way. They've lost their business because they were accounting in their head, thinking, "Oh man, I got this big job coming in," and blah blah blah. They go and they spend money, or they do something stupid. Well, the client doesn't pay them in 60, 90 days. Well, they owe other people, and now they're in a pickle, or the client doesn't come through at all. And there have been times where we've done jobs and the client never paid. They went out of business, bought by another company. Sometimes it can take a long time to get dough out of somebody. So you've got to be very, very careful not to spend quickly, but to plan.
Yeah.
And that's hard when you're an artist.
Hugely.
And you want to take pictures, and you want to have fun, and it's great to have, the models and hair and makeup and everybody around you. It's so much fun.
Yeah, so accounting and making sure, if you've got a job that you got for 10 grand and you're like, oh, I really want to get this new lens, it's not the time to go buy the lens.
Not necessarily. It's always good to take a pause, stop, take a look at it, think if you can really do it, if it's really necessary. Is it better to continue to rent? If you can own your own equipment, it's better, because you can test when you want, you can experiment more. It's just much better if you can own your own stuff, but not unless you're ready.
Right.
Don't go buy something that you're not ready for, because that turns into overhead, and overhead is a killer. If you can't manage your overhead, you're gonna go out of business.
Yeah, fixed costs will eat you alive.
Oh my God, they add up so fast.
They really do.
They add up so fast.
That's the last thing we're going to talk about today, before we get into your book. And so the end of part one, I want to know, for all those people who are starting out, year 1, year 2, year 3, in your experience of over 20 years, what are the things that you spend the money on, and what are the things that you don't? What's better to spend, and what's better to save?
I think that first and foremost, you want to spend the money on you, and that is on crafting your vision and marketing that vision. So I think that you definitely need to spend some money on either purchasing or renting the right equipment to do what you need to do in terms of executing a photograph. Be mindful of that. It's really easy to say, I want that lens and that lens and that, and it'd be great if we had this dolly and everything else. Be mindful of the money that you spend to create the images, because you can overspend and that can run you into trouble. Create good images, develop your style, and spend your money getting that out there, marketing your vision to the clients that you think you can work for. the shotgun approach of just putting stuff out there all over the place. And social media is great in so many ways, but it also goes to a lot of the wrong people.
Right.
So I think you want to spend some time researching your market and what you want to be involved with. If you're going to be a food photographer, what does that mean? Who are your potential food clients? Are they, if you're in Illinois, are they in California or are they in Illinois? And
Right.
what do you want to focus on? So I think it's really important to set aside some good dollars for marketing and for research and understanding exactly what your market's going to be and put them there. And then let it grow. Let that business grow. Be patient. Know it takes one step after another. You do a great job here and it's going to get you another job somewhere else. And it's exponential, but it takes a long time to build that up.
It does.
So I would say invest in yourself,
Yeah.
but do it wisely and with good conscience, and invest in your marketing.
Marketing is huge.
Marketing is everything, because if people don't know you're there, they can't hire you.
They can't hire you.
If they don't know your style, they're not going to be interested in you.
Right.
And and you have to market on different levels. You need direct mail, you need email, you need social media. For me, I need things like workbook. There are so many different approaches to marketing, and it's good to have a blending of that. There is no one magic pill. There's no
Right.
one magic pill. Social media has gotten a lot of people work. There's no question. To me, it's simply not the answer for everything, and that's something that's tough too. I think if you're young and starting out and you don't know where to spend your marketing dollars, talk to other photographers. Talk to somebody who's been in the business 20 years. Call me. I love to share my knowledge. I really like seeing other people's books and helping to give them ideas on where they can make it work and where they're not going to be able to make it work. Because this business is tough. It can chew people up.
Oh yeah.
And it's good to get the advice from people who have been around.
Couldn't
Not that
agree
you have
more.
to follow it,
Right.
but take it with a grain of salt and listen to what other people have done, because there may be something in there that could really help you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I always wonder why my mom is always right about any advice. I take it maybe half of the time, but she's always right.
I can't wait for my daughters to say that to me. That would be so nice. Yeah, it's because they've lived a little bit and
Exactly.
they know some stuff,
Exactly. So it's, take
Tough.
the advice of the people who've been there.
Yeah, tough lesson to learn though, isn't it?
Very tough. You think you're always right for some reason, but it turns out you rarely ever
Yeah,
are.
that's the power of youth.
Right? Exactly.
Young and invincible. Man, what a great thing.
So I love that. I think spending your money on marketing, developing your product and then letting people know what your product is. Are there any things that you would specifically stay away from as far as spending money on? Things that you've spent money on this, you're like, you know what, that was just kind of a waste. I could have saved that for something else.
That's kind of tough to say. Yeah, there's a marketing effort I did last year, getting involved with the company. That it just wasn't the right relationship for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that they're doing well for other people. It didn't work for me. That's hard to say unless you get into it.
Right.
I do think you cannot spend money on fixed costs that you're not able to handle over a long period of time. Don't look at renting a studio if you can't do it for multiple years to come. You've got to be able to know how to manage your money over the long term. And I think really, I couldn't give you one specific to say, don't spend your money on this.
Right.
I think this is a very individual business because we all are promoting our own style. We have our own style. We approach things differently. People need to spend their money the way that's right for them.
Right.
The one piece of advice I can say is take your time, really analyze what you want to spend your money on, and make sure that if it's a cost that's going to happen again and again and again, marketing, rent, staff, make sure you can handle it through thick and thin. Because the one thing that I have told a lot of people, I have a lot of students that come through the studio and they're all like, oh my God, this is so cool. And let's not beat around the bush. Photography is sexy, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Everything about this business looks awesome, and it is. The lenses are cool, the cameras are cool, the people involved in it are cool. It's got great tools, great toys, it's amazing. If you're gonna survive in this business, you have to be very secure within security. Because we don't know when we're gonna work next.
Right.
I often don't know on Monday what I'm gonna be doing on Friday or the following Friday. Our schedules are very much in flux. Clients will call. Sometimes we'll know that we're going to be doing a project 2 months in advance. Sometimes we'll get a call saying, can you shoot this in the next 2 days? Because I need it now. So that's insecurity.
Yep.
And if you're gonna make it in the long haul, get secure with that lack
Be
of
secure
stability.
with being insecure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bottom line.
It's perfect. Yeah. Huge deal.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Yeah.
And you know what? That'll mess with your mind. It'll keep you up at
will.
night.
Yes.
It'll make you question what you're doing, and you just got to think, all right, I'm going to be true to my images. I'm going to be true to what I do, and I'm going to deal with the fact that this business goes like this.
Really,
and I've been in it 20 years, and it's still up and down. There are periods where we're really busy, periods where we're not busy, and you can't always predict it. It changes from year to year.
So when the downtimes, just know it's going to go back up.
Yeah, you know,
Stick with it.
here's one thing that I can also say. This would be interesting for me to do. This would be a real interesting exercise. I know that most of my years, I haven't had the same client be the biggest client 2 years in a row. It fluctuates.
Yeah.
If I'm doing a huge campaign for Wild Turkey this year because they've rebranded and their labels are different and their logo is different and now they've got to blow everything out and redo it all, that's going to be my biggest client. Next year, they're not going to need to do that.
Good point.
So next year, my biggest client will not be not only will they not be my biggest client again, they might not need anything.
They might not
At all.
At all, right?
So they may go from being my biggest client to not working with them for another year or two. So that's that kind of up and down. That's hard. It makes it hard to plan.
Yeah. So make sure when you're up, make sure you're secure for when you're going down.
Yeah, you've got to plan. You've got to put money aside to get you through the low periods because
they will come.
Without question.
Yeah.
They're inevitable.
And that's what kills people's businesses is when they don't plan for the downtimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that downtime can be created from anything. It can be created from the market, where the market is. Your clients aren't ready. You can have something go wrong. I had a hip replacement last year. That took me out for quite a bit of time. You don't know what those low times are going to be, you know?
So, brilliant piece of advice from someone who's been in the industry a long time. Rob, this is the end of part one.
All right, that's it?
Yeah,
that's all you got?
I could talk for hours.
Me too.
I know you could too. We're going to pick it up with part two. We're going to go look through your book, and I'm going to ask you some product specific about some of your photos. And
cool.
It's going to be great. So make sure to join us for part two, guys, and hope you enjoyed part one.